I want to talk with you about the wilderness of Paran, or the desert of Paran. The claim is that the desert or the wilderness of Paran is probably the Hijaz region, which would then also include Mecca, which is why certain biblical mentions of the desert of Paran could be references to Mecca. To your knowledge, what can we say about the location of Paran?
So there are a couple different passages in the Hebrew Bible that give pretty clear indications about where the wilderness of Paran is. One is Numbers chapter 13. This is, talking about the time when the children of Israel have sort of encamped along the southern border of Canaan, and they're getting ready to send in spies. If you look at Numbers 13, they get sent out from the wilderness of Paran in the south, and they go up into the land and they spy it all out, and then they return back to the wilderness of Paran. And it says specifically that they go back, I think it's in verse 26, and they went back to Kadesh, which is in the wilderness of Paran. And this fits quite well, right? The idea that the Israelites are, along the southern border and going in, it's indicating that they're right on the border of Canaan. And if you think about where they've come from Egypt, and then they come up on the southern border. It's got to be somewhere in between Egypt and the southern portion of Canaan, down by the Negev. Also, there's another passage in 1 Kings. Solomon goes and fights against Hadad and Edom. When Hadad leaves, he's just a boy, and he flees from Edom, which is south of the Dead Sea, flees from there, goes through the area of Midian, which is like southern Transjordan, and goes through the wilderness of Paran to Egypt. The path is clear. He's going slightly southwest, and he's coming down into Egypt. So that all sort of locates this area, the wilderness of Paran, in that area. And then more specifically, when we learn that Kadesh Barnea is in the larger area that's called the wilderness of Paran, we know where Kadesh Barnea is, Kuderet. So yeah, this is all stuff that's south of the Negev, in between Sinai, like the Sinai Peninsula, and Egypt.
The Bible mentions several wildernesses and deserts. So even if it is in the Sinai Peninsula, that would make it a separate wilderness or a separate desert within the peninsula. It wouldn't mean that there is only one desert or only one wilderness in the Sinai Peninsula, right?
Yeah, and I think it's really important to recognize that following this return of the spies, that the Israelites are then sort of doomed to wander around for that generation. And where they wander is essentially Kadesh Barnea, right? So this is an important area that they're wandering in, and I think 38 years they spend in Kadesh Barnea or around it. So, it's a significant area.
Even if we didn't have the whole context and all the connected, dependent locations, it seems very unlikely to me that the desert of Paran could be referring to a very large region like the entire Hijaz region or the entire, western coast of Arabia, right? This would be very uncommon as far as I see it from my readings.
There seems to be a fair amount of specificity. Kadesh Barnea is the city, and then the larger area in which Kadesh Barnea is the wilderness of Paran. But if you just think about the area above Sinai and to the east of Egypt and to the west of Midian, it's big on a map, I guess, depending on what you're talking about. But it's very much a localized region. If you're trying to make it into an area that's larger, it makes the journey odd for somebody like Hadad coming out and then going somewhere else and then coming back up and going to Egypt. It doesn't seem like that's what they're intimating in the text, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. That's very helpful.